Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really digging into the roots of the Israel-Palestine conflict.
Yeah, focusing specifically on that formative time, let's say late Ottoman period, all the way up to 1967.
Exactly. We've got sources covering the big political changes, the social landscape, those flashpoints of violence, paramilitary groups.
And the competing narratives, which are crucial, how each side remembers these events.
Our mission here is just to unpack how this all started and, intensified based on these historical accounts.
Right, trying to trace how things developed.
So let's jump back to the Ottomans, 1500s up to World War I. Palestine wasn't quite a single thing administratively then, was it?
No, not like a modern state. It was more a geographical area divided into districts. Sanjaks, they called them. Jerusalem, Nablus, Acre.
And Jerusalem had a special status.
Yeah, governed directly from Constantinople. The Ottomans were mostly focused on, well, collecting taxes and keeping the peace, basically.
Okay, and the people living there, what was the mix like back then, say, mid-19th century?
Primarily Muslim Arab, around 84%. Then Christian Arabs, maybe 10%. And a Jewish community, around 5%.
And this is when we start seeing maybe the beginnings of a distinct Palestinian identity.
Sort of emerging, yeah, particularly around Jerusalem. And at the same time, you have Zionist ideas developing in Europe.
Driven by nationalism, anti-Semitism.
Exactly, seeking a Jewish state. Initially, coexistence was, relatively peaceful on the ground.
But the Zionist push for a homeland and the land purchases that started creating friction.
Definitely. Large land purchases, like the Sursak deals, often led to Arab tenant farmers being evicted. That caused real resentment.
And this is also when the first Aliyah happens, more Jewish immigration.
Right, 35,000 people. The Ottomans tried to put some restrictions in place, but it continued. And you also see early Jewish self-defense groups forming, like Hashomer.
Okay, so that kind of sets the scene for when the British take over after World War I, the Mandate period, starting around 1922.
And that period begins with a fundamental problem, the Balfour Declaration of 1917.
Britain promising support for a Jewish national home.
While also having made promises about Arab independence, trying to manage both just didn't work.
So immediate opposition from Palestinian Arabs.
Oh, yes. They saw the declaration and the mandate itself as a betrayal. They formed groups like the Muslim Christian Associations, the Palestine Arab Congress.
And the tensions, especially over land, just kept rising through the 20s and 30s.
They absolutely did. The Jewish National Fund was buying land, often from absentee owners, leading to more evictions. Britain's land policies didn't really help matters either.
And this boiled over into actual violence. Nebi Musa, Jaffa.
Yes, the riots in 1920, 1921. And the commissions investigating afterwards, like Haycraft, pointed to Arab anger over Jewish immigration and the political situation.
Then the 1929 riots, the Al-Barak uprising over the Western Wall.
Another major flashpoint. The Shah Commission then also cited Arab fears, both political and economic, about the future.
Which leads us into the Great Palestinian Revolt, 1936-39. What kicked that off?
A combination of things, really. Economic hardship, another surge in Jewish immigration after the rise of Nazism, continued land issues.
It was a major uprising, a general strike, attacks.
Very significant, against Jewish and British targets. The Arab Higher Committee laid out demands. The British response was harsh, militarily.
And the Peel Commission suggested partition during this time.
It did in 1937. The first real proposal to divide the land. Zionists accepted it in principle, though maybe reluctantly, but the Arabs rejected it outright.
The revolt was eventually crushed, but at a high cost.
Thousands of Arab lives lost, and it led to the British issuing the 1939 White Paper.
Which limited Jewish immigration and land sales. That must have infuriated the Zionists.
It did. They saw it as Britain reneging on the Balfour Promise. But interestingly, around the same time, the British also started arming the Haganah, the main Zionist militia.
Let's talk about those militias. Haganah was the main one.
Yes, evolved from Hashomer. Initially, it was quite decentralized, but the 1929 riots spurred unification. They had a policy of havlagah, self-restraint, for a while.
But then came splits, the Irgun.
Right. Split off in 1931, more aggressive, linked to revisionist Zionism. They rejected havlagah, wanted a Jewish state in all of Palestine, and launched attacks on Arab civilians and the British.
And Lehi, or the Stern Gang, was even more radical.
Split from the Irgun in 1940. Considered the most extreme, responsible for assassinations like Lord Moyne. Their violence and the Irguns, like market bombings, aimed to terrorize Palestinians and pressure the British. King David Hotel bombing in '46 by the Irgun is a major example.
Okay, so fast forward past World War II. The Holocaust creates immense pressure for Jewish immigration.
Huge pressure. But the British stick to the white paper limits, leading to illegal immigration attempts, detention camps. The U.S. is also pushing Britain.
Britain's caught in the middle.
Completely. Attempts at power sharing failed. So in February 1947, they basically washed their hands of it and hand the problem to the newly formed United Nations.
Enter the UN and UNESCO, the UN Special Committee on Palestine.
They investigate and propose partition again, dividing Palestine into an Arab state and a Jewish state, with Jerusalem internationalized.
How is that received?
The Jewish leadership accepted it, maybe strategically, with reservations. The Arab leadership flatly rejected it again. They saw it as unjust, giving a minority population a state on land they viewed as theirs.
But the UN General Assembly voted for it. Resolution 181, November 1947.
It passed, yes, despite strong Arab opposition. And that vote is widely seen as the immediate catalyst for war.
Things escalated very quickly after that vote, didn't they?
Almost immediately. Just before the vote, actually, there was the killing of the Shubaki-family by Lehi.
As a reprisal.
Lehi claimed it was for alleged collaboration with the British, but it definitely heightened tensions. Then, the day after the UN vote, November 30th.
The bus attacks.
Right. Arab militants attacked 2 Jewish buses, killing 7, seen by many, including Haganah intelligence at the time, as direct retaliation for the Shubaki killings.
And those bus attacks are often marked as the start of the Civil War phase.
Yes. 1947-1948 Civil War. The UN vote provided the political spark. These killings and retaliations lit the fuse for widespread violence.
So the Civil War begins. Arab attacks, Haganah responses.
Initially, Haganah was defensive, but then it shifted. Plan Dalit, sometimes called Plan D, was implemented around April 1948.
What was the goal of Plan Dalit?
To secure the areas the UN had allocated to the Jewish state, and strategic points beyond that before the British fully withdrew. It involved taking control of Arab towns and villages and, well, led to significant Arab depopulation.
Then comes May 14th, 1948.
David Ben-Gurion declares the State of Israel. The British mandate ends.
And the next day.
Armies from neighboring Arab states, Egypt, Transjordan, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon intervene, ostensibly to help the Palestinians and prevent the Jewish state.
The conflict becomes an interstate war.
Exactly. The Haganah becomes the Israel Defense Forces, the IDF. They manage to halt the Arab advances and eventually gain the upper hand. The war ends with armistice agreements in 1949.
But the outcome for Palestinians is devastating. The Nakba.
The catastrophe, yes. Over 700,000 Palestinian Arabs, roughly half the Arab population, became refugees, either fleeing or expelled. Hundreds of villages were destroyed or depopulated. There were massacres. Israel ended up controlling about 77% of Mandate Palestine.
A profoundly transformative event. And the conflict didn't end there, obviously. The 50s and 60s saw more wars.
Right. The Suez Crisis in 56, though more about Egypt, Britain, France, and Israel versus Nasser, had regional fallout.
And then the really big one, 1967, the Six-Day War.
Yeah, the tensions had been building for years. Disputes over Jordan River water, clashes on the Syrian border, Palestinian Fadain attacks.
Nasser closes the Straits of Tiran.
That was the casus belli for Israel. Egypt had expelled UN peacekeepers, mass troops. Israel launched a preemptive airstrike on June 5th.
And the result was swift and decisive.
Incredibly so. Israel captured the Sinai Peninsula and Gaza from Egypt, the West Bank, including East Jerusalem from Jordan, and the Golan Heights from Syria.
Huge territorial gains. And another wave of Palestinian refugees.
Yes, hundreds of thousands more displaced. And over 1 million Palestinians now living under Israeli military rule. It marks the beginning of the long-term occupation. UN Resolution 242 called for land for peace, but the Arab League responded with the 3 no's: no peace, no recognition, no negotiation.
So up to this point, 1967, we see these two fundamentally different ways of understanding everything we've just talked about.
Absolutely. The Zionist narrative emphasizes, the historical Jewish connection, Zionism as a liberation movement against anti-Semitism, the legality of land purchases, and the wars as self-defense necessary for survival. The displacement of Palestinians is often downplayed or blamed on Arab leaders telling them to leave, though many historians dispute that now.
And the Palestinian narrative
focuses on being the indigenous population, seeing Zionism as a colonial project backed by imperial powers, leading to their disposition, the Nakba, which they often view as a planned ethnic cleansing. They emphasize ongoing suffering and the denial of their right to return, viewing the rejection of partition as a response to an inherently unfair proposal.
So a complete clash of understanding over legitimacy, history, victimhood.
Right down to the core events. 1948 is the War of Independence for Israelis, the Nakba for Palestinians. These aren't just different opinions, they're fundamentally opposing frameworks for understanding the past and therefore the present.
We've covered a lot of ground from Ottoman administration shifts, early Zionist activity, the turbulent British Mandate partition, the 1948 war and Nakba, up to the transformative 67 war, and touched on these clashing narratives.
It's incredibly dense, and each phase layered more complexity onto the situation.
It really makes you think, considering how deeply these historical narratives diverge and how much the events before 1967 shaped everything that followed, how crucial is it to actually understand both narratives, not necessarily agree, but grasp their core logic if there's ever going to be a way forward? And, what responsibility do outside actors have in acknowledging these conflicting histories when they try to mediate or find solutions? Something to chew on.